Dr. Angel Daniels. I'm an associate professor and curriculum coordinator for general education at Bon Secours Memorial College of Nursing in Richmond, Virginia. So today I'm going to be presenting on experiencing the journey. Think about that title. The integration of DEI teaching strategies that we can use in didactic, clinical, or simulated experiences. In their position statement, the American Association of College of Nurses made a call to maximize opportunities for students, leadership, and faculty from diverse backgrounds and some who have shared experiences. But even though the diversity of the nursing workforce is steadily starting to grow, statistically, the numbers are still bleak and grim. We're still trying to get there. Yet, we know that there's a lot of work that still needs to be done. We just heard that, right? You know, Dr. DeWitty made that call as well. More work needs to be done. It needs to be done so we can increase equity and we can expand nursing from those of different backgrounds so we can increase our RN workforce. So the topic I picked today, experiential learning, is near and dear to me, and I feel like it is really a great pedagogy to integrate and learn from, to develop skills, competencies, and awareness. So if we use experiential learning, with a focus on realistic diversity and equity and inclusion scenarios and strategies, our leaders, our faculty, our students can go through these life experiences of underrepresented groups. My objectives, I'm going to demonstrate the efficacy of utilizing interactive DEI teachings as a mechanism of skill and development for nursing leaders, faculty, and students. We're going to examine the effectiveness of DEI simulations as an evidence-based clinical resource and tool to enhance the knowledge and skills needed to confront racism and bias. And also think about developing a plan to create an immersive experience that will promote awareness, links justice, diversity, and equity, along with inclusivity, to nursing education and professional practice. The method I used to come up with my presentation, I did a lot of literature review. In the beginning, I couldn't find a lot to support how we can be more intentional in our teachings. So I started looking up experiential learning, simulations, and I found that there was a lot of impact about bias and racism towards historically underrepresented populations, particularly in nursing academia. So as a result, there is a need for training and resource. There's a need to have accountability, increase awareness, to confront racism and bias as the situations occur. Rooted in the past, look at these beautiful images. And, you know, I'm just at awe. When I was looking, I was just at awe, looking at all these people who have endured some type of racism, injustice, discrimination, a lot of things to get to where we are today, right? We have Mary Eliza Mahoney. Up in the top, we have Francis Williams. These are two students that wanted to attend nursing school in San Diego, and they were told they can go anywhere else but here. They were told they could not stay in the dormitories, that they had to stay home and be shuttled to their classes, could not eat with the white students in the dining hall, but yet still persevered, still stayed true to their path and their heart's desire. Being able to sit on the floor outside your class and take notes. Can you imagine that? I can't. I cannot imagine. And whether they were willing to be formally trained as nurses or whether they served as roles as nurses, as you see, Sojourner Truth, Harriet Tubman, we all are grounded in the history of the people that paved the way for us to be here today. found this quote from James Baldwin, and it says, "Not everything that is faced can be changed, but nothing can be changed until it's faced." And that is so true. That spoke to me in so many ways. Because the lack of inclusion in the nursing profession, it continues to reflect persistent and systemic disparities in society and education. And unless we intentionally acknowledge and challenge them, we can't change them. The elephant in the room. This is a term I use a lot in my own nursing program, because when we talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion, when we talk about racism, everybody gets quiet. They get uncomfortable. They don't want to have the uncomfortable conversation. But racism is a public health crisis. It's impacting everyone everywhere. Not just in nursing schools, not just in the hospitals, the clinics, but in our patient populations as well, with housing, with economic challenges. So it is a problem, and it's that systemic and structural racism, the process to say it's okay to keep doing these things. The policies, the practices, the belief that enable the unfair treatment and oppression of people of color. And what happens? A lot of adverse outcomes, a lot of unwanted things that we don't want to see. In our nursing education system, we see a lot of our students not progressing or not being mentored to get through the program and do what we know they can do. Dr. DeWitty made a statement about the number of Black nurses who have master's degree. I had a conversation with my dean, and she said, "Why don't you think, or what do you think is the problem that we can't recruit more Black nurses?" And she thought about it. She said, "Well, I don't think there's a lot of nurse educators with master's degrees." And she wasn't talking about anyone else but nurses of color. And I looked at her, and I said, "Well, you're going to be really surprised about the ones with DMPs and PhDs." And for some reason, I wasn't shocked to hear that response, but I was really like, wow. So in our current state of DEI training programs, I read somewhere that DEI is on the rise, right? We're being loud, we're being intentional. We want to be heard, we want to advocate, we want change to happen, right? So the increased awareness of it has compelled nursing education programs to start to deploy DEI training. And some start with training on implicit bias, unconscious bias. Let's have these modules completed every year to stay in compliance. Some are targeting recruitment, getting better with retention, and even trying to start that pathway for better promotion. There are some who target just their mission statement. We're going to change that language and put it out there, and they're going to know that we are culturally diverse and we accept everyone. It's the place to be. They put in DEI positions or officers, task force, work groups, policies, and procedures. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm not discounting this work. Everybody has to start somewhere. But is it an intentional start? Or are they just checking that box? From speaking from my own experience at my own college that I work for, I'm the only Black faculty member there, and I've been there for 7 years. So, of course, I was elected to be a part of the task force. But guess who's leading it? No, 3 white women. And I don't say that to say anything bad about, our white sisters, but I'm just saying if you're going to create a diverse group, and everybody who's leading the group is the same, where's the diversity from that point of view to start? So then, we start working on these mission statements, and then they said, no, we want to define DEI. And I said, well, don't we already know this? After we build these statements, what are y'all going to do? Well, this is where we need to start first. We need the data. Well, the data is that the majority of our student populations are non-black or non-people of color. Yes, but they didn't want to hear that. When I suggested maybe hiring a DEI officer, not even myself, well, we don't think that's the right move right now. I said, well, then what happens to all this work that we're doing? All these policies and definitions you created, they're just going to fall right by the wayside. Because a year ago, when I suggested we started a DEI group, when I suggested we incorporate our students, they shot me down. Said the health system doesn't want that. Okay. So the integration of DEI nursing education, despite all the calls, despite the need to advocate, despite the need to lead change, seeing DEI and justice as a critical element to achieve academic excellence and have a stronger nurse workforce, it still remains a challenge to promote and integrate DEI in nursing education. We must start this training, this classroom training, this conversation, communication, collaboration with leadership and faculty first. Because as we all know, we lead by examples. Students pick up off of what they see. And focusing on promoting and retaining Black faculty or faculty of color. And I say that because even in the year when I first started, and a lot of students didn't even know me, they would come to my office and they would say, Dr. Daniels, I'm glad to see you are here. And me not even thinking about it at the time, I was like, okay. Well, maybe they know me from somewhere, you know? Maybe they heard of my good name. But it wasn't until they came into my office, and students I have not taught at all, they were not my students, and just have these breakdowns of what's happening to them. And it just broke my heart, because I didn't know what to say to them. So what I did was I thought back, because fortunately and unfortunately, I went back to teach at the school I graduated from, nursing. I went at night, and we had a class of 40, smaller class, so it was only 4 people of color there. And only 2 of us made it out. My first week there, I had an APA writing assignment, and I did horrible. I can tell you guys, I did horrible. But my instructor used my paper, held it up in front of the classroom and said, this is for you to know. This is what you should not do. And held it up with my grade. Yes. I left out of there crying. And the only other Black faculty there, she was an older woman. She was there forever. She said, let me tell you something. And she leaned over, take some honey. They think we can't do nothing. And I told her, I said, you know, Dr. Booker, I said, I don't know. Maybe I don't belong here. Maybe I shouldn't be here. You know, I was a high school dropout, a teen mom. So everything for me was harder. I had to learn harder words. I had to use dictionaries to help me understand certain words. I had to get my daughter to help me with my statistics and math so I can understand it. So when this happened to me, I felt like I was the imposter. I need to leave. And she said, what I want you to do is you go back and you talk to that instructor. You have her sit down with you and verbally tell you your mistakes and how to correct them. And she said, I'm telling you this because one thing I'm showing you now is called professionalism. And she said, if you don't get the answer you need out of her, then you come back to me and I'll make sure you get it. And I went back to her. It was not the best experience, but I did go back to that specific teacher. Disparities in our nursing programs. Statistically, there go that word again, statistically. Underrepresented students and faculty populations in nursing education is low. We have said that multiple times. The nursing students or people of color who work in primarily white institutions, they do feel disadvantaged. They do feel isolated or alone. We do go through micro and macro aggressions. I have endured that personally. We do suffer with people and their biases. And they will say, well, I love everyone. I don't have a problem with anyone. But you feel the need to say that. And something as small as my first day at the job, it was during Christmas, we had a Christmas party. I just showed up, didn't bring anything to the party, but I was told to come on. And one of the ladies came up to me, she said, hi, Angel. That collard green dish was good, did you bring it? And I looked at, and at the time, you know, East End Churchill Angel was coming out. And I had to bring her back down. And I walked away. But the sad part of it was, I pondered myself for a while saying, was I being sensitive? Was it me? Well, maybe she really just didn't mean it that way. I was making excuses. But I maintained my professionalism through it. So in addition to that, our students and faculty have voice in multiple studies and from our own experience, and I'm sure some of yours, they receive less support to succeed. The voice of our future nurses. Now this slide right here tells a lot to me because I've lived it, I've seen it, and just in my research, it really showed me that, okay, I'm just not making this up in my head either. Our underrepresented nursing students deem the absence of relationships with their classmate and faculty as their greatest problem. That is just sad to read. Some students will express that they don't get the same extension on assignment that their classmate might have gotten. Or the faculty, every time I reach out to her, she can't accompany the time that I have because I have to work and I have to go get my children, blah, blah, blah. Or in certain courses, the percentage of students who always tend not to pass and have to take the class again are students of color or diverse backgrounds. They highlight areas of concern with the curriculum and learning objectives, even in the simulation labs. I had one student rallying because she wanted to see diverse mannequins in the simulation lab. The students are challenging some of the books because some of the books are stereotyping. And I think that is great. They're starting right now to start advocating and seeing things. Student experiences challenges or unjust treatments in their nursing program tend to stay silent. They are silent and they suffer in silence because they don't know who to trust. They don't know who to go to. They have a fear of retaliation. Am I gonna get in trouble? So they will come to my office and say, Dr. Daniels, I don't know what to do. Who should I talk to? And I used the same example that that instructor told me. I said, well, first, go back to the teacher. Because you want to be able to say, you went back, you did the right chain of command, and spoke with her to see if you could work it out. And if that doesn't happen, then you come back to me, and together we'll go to the next step. I have students that graduated and went on to the units and still finding that they're experiencing that unjust treatment and bias. And they text me or email me, I don't know who to talk to. They don't know who have their backs, right? So I don't know if any of you are familiar with this. You can't understand someone until you walked a mile in their shoes. Now, I used to hear my grandma say that all the time. I don't know why, But it seemed like every time I did something wrong, she would say it. So I'm starting to think it was because I was just doing something I wasn't supposed to be doing. But I want you to hold on to that thought as we continue to talk. Experiential learning, we know, is an evidence-based way to teach. You can use interactive mechanisms that will intentionally allow individuals to experience the journey and reflect on the different life experiences of people of color. I found that simulation was the best way to do that, and a lot of the reasons. I looked at a research article from Duke University. And so what they did is they created simulations with trigger videos. So they would use small segments, 3 to 5 minutes, of emotionally intense video. It could be from George Floyd, it could be from other things. These are the situations and scenarios they were capturing. And they started these experiences, not with the students, but with the faculty. And they said that they designed them, or they did case studies, and they designed them so emotional that they need to have an experienced counselor there because it triggered so much emotion. They also felt that it was important when you're creating these DEI-focused simulations that you have DEI consultant or representative or someone who knows the language and the work. But they also say you need a diverse team to run it because you would defeat the purpose if you create a DEI scenario with an all-white team and expecting the same outcome. So let's mix it up. And then another crucial part of it is you need to have a debriefing room because there are going to be emotions and a lot of different feelings, good or bad, that's going to come out after seeing these videos. We know how we feel when we just see them on the news. Every day you're waking up to something and there's something else to happen. And you can relate. So this is the purpose of doing these experiential learning, including DEI-focused content, to trigger, to have them share the emotion, experience that journey. And I went ahead of myself, but the trigger videos, again, they're real life short clips, so they're really taking actual scenarios that's happened now or in history or in another country, and they're using them to trigger emotions, to experience the diversity, the inequities, the injustice, and hopefully can change, not change your mindset, but make them more aware, and actually feel what others goes through. Now, another few articles that I researched suggested role play. Now, this is something that can be done in a classroom setting, creating specific scenarios and let the students play them out. And that is actually a great strategy as well. Depending on the design and the intensity of what you're creating, it can be very beneficial and very effective. Similar to trigger videos, though, roles play understanding and application in the learning through experience-based learning activities. So, summarizing the experience. When you see this picture here, does it make you reflect or think on anything that you see in this picture? We've seen it so much. We've looked at the different things that happen to each one of these individuals in this picture. So these are some of the content that they use at Duke for their simulation experience. Learners are provided a safe space to discuss how they reacted or their reaction to the experience, and they have facilitators, again, to support anyone triggered by the experience. So how does all of this evolve? DEI in clinical practice. Through experiential learning, students are aware of biases, they're aware of biased situations, and can use positive interventions and practice, and this can be modeled in the clinical setting. So if they're taught to interact with each other and resolve their indifferences or approach things in a positive manner, this transpires into the clinical setting when they're caring for patients. It prepares them to meet the needs of different populations other than themselves. I had the opportunity a few weeks ago to work in a tribal practice. I was working with a clinician, learning from her, and it was the greatest experience I've had in a clinical setting. The culture, the difference, and I learned so much. And I think that is sometimes what we need, that different experience. Through these DEI experiences, students reflect on the knowledge they have acquired and recognize and understand systemic barriers and how they impact patient populations along with student populations. So again, we're not just talking about the students, we're talking about the faculty and leadership as well. And it also promotes that confidence, the skills to decrease that feeling of imposter syndrome. That same feeling I had when I was in nursing school, it felt like I was not supposed to be here. But look at me today. I made it through. So my proposed next step, this is a nice word I love to hear, eradicate. Let's just eradicate the barriers to nursing education, starting with discriminatory processes from admissions to progression. Now, my College of Nursing decided to start with holistic admissions. We were charged with increasing our student population, and they should be a diverse student population. Well, I sit on the Admissions and Progressions Committee. There was a big fight over that. They didn't want to do that because generally what they said, well, we've been working for years. We just don't want to do it. So as the student population began to grow, well, of course, we had some numbers of failures starting to increase, right? So I heard two comments that made me get up and walk out the meeting. So the first one was, well, can those people even critically think? The second one was, well, no wonder our numbers are changing. We are letting anybody in now. So rather than to even allow them to see me that upset, I had excused myself. I said, I need to go make a phone call. And I left out the room. But what I did was I went to my dean's office and I talked to her. I said, you know, as our numbers going to keep increasing, we're going to have students, not just of color, but some students are going to struggle. So what are our resources? Are we thinking about our social determinants of education for our students? Are we thinking about maybe a writing center for those students who have difficulty writing? Test-taking strategies, things we can do. I said, let's open a food pantry. And I said, we don't have to have anybody monitor it, but if they're in need and they're struggling and they need some help, they can just go get what they want out of that pantry and take it home. We need to get out of that mindset also that underrepresented populations just won't do well. But let's highlight the ones who are doing well. Yes. I'm almost out of time? Okay. All right. Another thing I want to say is I read also that cross-racial mentoring is a good step. It is a really good step to learn from one another. So learning from different races, just like I had the experience in the tribal clinic, it was a great opportunity to learn about different cultures and how they approach their culture. All right, I'm gonna run through this quickly since I'm running out of time. The one thing I want to point out here is that representation matters. It really does. Our students want to see people who look like us, and our patients do too. Our patient populations want to see people who look like them, not just us, but who look like them. And we also want to decrease the adverse outcome of not doing nothing, because this impacts our population's health. It continues that deficit of having a diverse workforce, and it creates an inclusive environment of respect and humility if we can change the game. So I'm just going to leave you with this. Walking in someone else's shoes isn't about the shoes itself. It's not about the walk, but it's about the experiencing the journey, to think like they may have to think. to feel what they may have to feel and understand why we are who we are because of the pathway that was set before us to get here today. Thank you for allowing me to share my presentation.
Maybe 2 minutes for questions. Yeah.
Thank you. Here we go.
First of all, thank you for that wonderful presentation. And me as a professor, that's one of my main goals, is to target underrepresented students. And one of the challenges I have, and I wanted to hear your thoughts, is we have all the stuff there available, the holistic, we have all the resources like office hours. My challenge I'm facing is that the students are not coming. So last year, this is my third year doing undergrads. The undergrad, last year I never had, not one student of color came to my office hours. Second year I taught not barely any, and now I have a few, and once I see them, I kind of suck them in. And then I have another person of color teaching the class with me, and she and I are kind of like sharks, and we've kind of honed in on them, but they're still not coming in, especially the black men. They just, and when we look at the scores, we have the top 10, and I look at the photo roster, and the bottom 10, all majority of them are students are underrepresented. We actually been going through during like breaks during lecture, we kind of go through and say, hey, we know this is going on, what's going on? And most of them saying they don't feel, they feel, they have the imposter syndrome. They don't feel good asking questions during class. They don't feel like they have to, they'll feel bad if they have to show up and ask for extra help. They think they're bothering us, even though we try our best to encourage them. You're not bothering us, come on. When they sit down, we kind of, give them the real deal. So how do you think I should address that? Because that's my biggest challenge. They're not coming. One of my ideas I have is to set a student ambassador, because I do have one or two African-American people that come to my office hours regularly, and I was planning to say, hey, I need to seek out these students and tell them, come to me, because I noticed during the end of the semester, some of them more just reaching out to me personally instead of the other teacher that's white. So I'm trying to find a way to continue to do it without being biased, because it'll be obvious. I would just go to the black students, and there's 400 students I have, and there's only about 20%. But my goal is to seek them out, and I know it's not because it's a skill. They're skilled enough, they can pass, but they have some type of barriers that's causing them not to seek help. So I just wanted to hear your opinion. How should I address that?
Well, I do think that you're starting in the right direction. I think they may be experiencing that feeling with other instructors. And so it kind of, unfortunately, pours over to you. They feel like, I don't want to ask the question because it might sound stupid. I don't want to bother my instructor. And maybe they got a negative response before. But I also think, don't give up. I like the idea of the student champions and use the student community as a way to pull them together. Let the students take the lead who want to champion, and you be their support. And do it that way, and that way it's coming from their peers, and they can lean on each other and still realize they have you to support them as well.
Yeah, I do. Can I? Angel, that was amazing. I would love to be able to get your thoughts on how do we transition this conversation towards the microaggression and retention of faculty. Because as much as we want to pour into our students and be a representation for them to have a safe space, for them to have a mentor that looks like them, the reality is that it is a challenge for faculty of color to be in these white institutions when we have to experience and be met with the larger population of Caucasian students attacking us. And how do we stay retained and stay whole? Because that part is equally as difficult.
Absolutely. That's the work that I'm still asking myself too. How do we, and I also ask myself every day, why am I still here? And a large part of that is because I'm there for those students. No matter how small amount they are, I'm still there for them, as long as I can hang in there too. Because I want to see something change before I leave them. Because at my school, they just sent out a survey to all the faculties about what are their concerns with the grades decreasing. So I'm very anxious to read what the responses are, even though I already know what all I'm gonna say.
Thank you. This is such a great discussion. Thank you, Dr. Daniel. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.